welcome to Whispers of the Night. Tonight, we step aboard a gentle journey, a story of railways, of bridges, tunnels, and time. This is not just a tale of trains, but of quiet landscapes, memory, and the spaces between each breath. So settle into comfort, let your body sink deeper into stillness, and allow your thoughts to drift like smoke rising into the night sky. Tonight's story is called The Last Night Train. Before our journey begins, let us first prepare the body and mind for rest. Take a slow, deep breath in, and let it drift out, as if it were smoke rising gently from the train's chimney. Notice how your shoulders soften, how your chest feels lighter with every exhale. The steady rhythm of the breath is like the soft turning of wheels along the track, steady, gentle, unhurried. With each breath, imagine yourself sinking deeper into the seat of the train, supported, safe, carried. The world outside begins to blur, and your focus rests only here, in this moment, in this carriage of quiet. The low hum of stillness surrounds you, like the distant whistle of a train disappearing into night. And as you breathe, you notice, the body grows heavier, yet lighter at once, rooted in peace, yet floating toward dreams. Each breath draws you closer to sleep, like stations passing in the distance, fading into memory. You are ready now, to board the last night train. The last night train. The lantern at the station. The station is almost empty. Its stillness feels like a pause in the flow of time, as if the night itself holds its breath to listen. You stand upon the worn wooden planks, and in your hand, the lantern glows. Its light is soft, not bright, more like a gentle heartbeat against the fog that drifts low across the tracks. The mist curls and folds as if shy of the glow, retreating a little and then returning, as though it, too, wishes to listen to the night. The lantern is not heavy, yet you feel the weight of its history. Lanterns have guided travelers for centuries, carrying a flame through darkness, marking paths across oceans, deserts, and rails. In the soft hush, you imagine the countless nights when lanterns were the only answer to shadows, when their small radiance gave courage to weary travelers. Fire turned to flame, flame into oil, oil into kerosene, and then, in time, into the electricity that hums now unseen in wires. And still, the lantern remains in your hand, reminding you that even the simplest light can lead the way. You gaze down the tracks. They stretch out, dark and silver, their lines running smooth into the unknown. The rails are like drawn threads of thought, pulled taut into the night. They hum faintly, not from a train, but from the world itself, the sound of cooling steel meeting the coolness of air. Iron expands with heat and contracts with cold, so even in stillness, the tracks shift, breathe, and live. You think of how far they reach, through valleys, across rivers, over mountains, stitching towns together like beads upon a string. The railway is both a boundary and a bridge, holding within it the promise of movement. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird calls. Its sound flutters above the silence, a reminder that even the darkest hour carries voices of life. The lantern trembles a little in your hand as a breeze passes. You lift it higher, and the glass sides glow with a warmer hue. That glow reminds you of stars, how they too are lanterns hung across the night, their light traveling vast distances to touch the earth. To stand on this station, lantern in hand, is to stand between two forms of guidance, the human light that you carry and the eternal light that arrives from galaxies far beyond. Both invite you to keep going, to trust the road, to surrender to the journey. You take a step closer to the edge of the platform. The rails shimmer in the fog, and you imagine the rhythm of trains that have passed here. Each wheel striking the track makes a note, and together, they form a song, a metallic hymn that travels with the train across landscapes. The science of sound travels with it, vibrations carried through steel, through air, through the chambers of the ear, until they become memory. Every traveler has felt that music in their bones, the steady lull of motion that rocks them toward sleep. The train is not only transport, it is a cradle that hums a lullaby of steel and distance. Your lantern seems to agree, its flame bending as though to listen to the invisible song. You think of how light, too, is a vibration, a wave, a messenger. Every flicker carries both energy and meaning, a silent communication between matter and mind. This gentle glow is only one small wavelength among countless others, yet in this moment, it becomes a companion, steady, constant, and present. The night deepens. The station clock ticks softly, though you cannot see its face through the mist. Time itself feels loosened, as if the rules of hours and minutes do not apply in this waiting place. You breathe, and the air tastes faintly of iron and dew. Waiting has its own science, its own rhythm. The heart slows, the mind drifts, and even the body understands that stillness is a kind of journey. You are moving even as you stand still, for thought itself travels. Lanterns, tracks, stars, they all lead you outward, but also inward. The station is a threshold. Every threshold is both an ending and a beginning. You remember that railways were once a revolution, collapsing distance, shrinking the world into reachable portions. Entire landscapes that once took weeks by foot or horse could be crossed in days, even hours. Yet for all their power, trains also slowed life, giving travelers time to look out windows, to count trees, to measure rivers, to see the land not as obstacle but as passing dream. The lantern sways gently as you shift your weight. Its flame reminds you of how fragile fire once was, how humans guarded embers like treasure, carrying sparks across miles to keep the promise of warmth alive. You wonder if the first rail workers felt the same as you do now, holding their lanterns in fog, waiting for the next train to arrive. Perhaps they whispered to the night, too, their words curling like mist into the dark. A faint tremor runs through the rails. You lean closer, listening. Not yet a sound, not yet a whistle, but a vibration, the first quiet announcement that something is coming. The lantern flickers as if in response. That is how trains announce themselves, not in sight but in sensation. You feel it before you see it, the low resonance of steel upon steel, echoing from miles away. The earth itself begins to hum, and in that hum, you recognize anticipation. Science tells us that vibrations travel faster through solid matter than through air. The rails, hard and dense, carry the message of the train long before the wind delivers its voice. You stand in the middle of that physics, experiencing how the world communicates its secrets to those who wait and listen. It feels ancient, even sacred, the knowledge that matter speaks before words arrive. The mist thickens, then parts in ribbons. You see nothing yet, but you imagine the engine, the carriages, the hidden faces within. Somewhere, someone is leaning against a window pane, half asleep, dreaming of their own destination. Somewhere, someone carries a letter in their pocket, a map, a memory, a hope. Each train is more than metal and speed. It is a gathering of lives, a slow constellation of moving stars, each passenger a story shifting through space and time. You breathe in deeply, letting the air settle in your chest. The lantern's glow feels steady, like a heartbeat beside your own. Waiting becomes a meditation. The tracks stretch not only outward but inward, across the landscapes of thought. The train is not here yet, and still you feel carried. That is the secret of journeys. They begin before movement. They begin with the hush of anticipation, the gathering of self, the surrender to what comes next. Your eyes follow the rails into the fog again. Somewhere beyond, they curve and divide, splitting paths, choosing directions. You cannot see them, but you know they exist, branching across the land like veins in a leaf. Every choice of track shapes a future, every divergence opens a possibility. In this way, railways echo life itself, paths chosen, paths unseen, paths still waiting to be discovered. The lantern's glass glows warmer as the night deepens further. You hold it close, listening again to the vibration in the rails. It is stronger now, clearer, but still unseen. The train is not here yet. You are still waiting, but the waiting is enough. It carries you deeper, like the rhythm of waves pulling the tide. And as you listen, you wonder where the last night train might carry you tonight. Perhaps into fields that stretch beyond memory, or into stories hidden within the stars. But to know that, you must first step aboard, and that is where the next chapter begins. Rails across the fields. The mist of the station lingers in your memory as you step into the countryside, where the rails begin to stretch into open space. Here, the world feels wider, more generous. The lantern's glow is behind you now, and in its place, the horizon itself becomes your light. The steel lines run straight and steady, cutting through meadows that breathe with quiet life. Each blade of grass bends with the dawn's damp weight, and in the distance, a river glimmers like a thread of glass. You walk beside the rails, and with each step, you sense how deeply they belong here. They are not just tools of transport, they are companions to the land. The steel shines in long, unbroken paths, yet beneath them lies a foundation of countless stones. Those stones, called ballast, hold the weight of every train, keeping the rails aligned, keeping the journey true. Each small rock plays its part, carrying vibrations, channeling pressure, ensuring that movement is possible. You think of how strength often hides in the smallest pieces, invisible but essential. The rhythm of rails across fields has always been human rhythm. You imagine the workers who first laid these tracks, their hammers striking iron spikes with steady cadence. The sound must have echoed across the countryside like a heartbeat. Strike, pause, strike, pause. Their bodies swayed with the effort, their sweat mingling with the soil, their vision stretched far beyond the horizon. Railways were not just built, they were dreamed into being. They turned wilderness into pathway, isolation into connection, silence into song. The land itself shaped the rails, too. Every meadow crossed, every river bridged, every hill tunneled, each was a negotiation between human intention and Earth's quiet resistance. To carve rails across the fields was to learn the language of the land, to understand its slopes and soils, its water and stone. Engineers studied the ground carefully, for rails must not wander too sharply. A train, heavy and long, cannot twist or turn as a footpath does. Instead, it requires a gentle curve, a patient bend, so that momentum and balance remain intact. In this way, the steel lines follow nature's quiet geometry, bowing to the physics of motion. As you drift along the path, you notice how the fields embrace the rails rather than reject them. Birds rest upon the wires, seeds scatter in the gravel, wildflowers push their roots through the ballast. Life does not stop for steel, it learns to grow alongside it. The countryside becomes a dialogue, the steady permanence of rails and the fleeting bloom of petals, the call of a bird, the sweep of wind across tall grass. It is harmony born of contrast, and in its presence, you feel a deep calm. You pause at a crossing, where wooden planks stretch over the rails. Here, the lines feel less like a boundary and more like an invitation. You imagine how many feet and wheels have passed this place, carts, bicycles, horses, and now cars, each intersecting briefly with the enduring rhythm of trains. The crossing is a meeting point, a reminder that journeys overlap, that paths converge for an instant before drifting apart again. Life, too, is filled with such crossings, where stories touch and then continue on their separate ways. The river ahead catches your attention. Its surface ripples with soft light, reflecting sky and rail together. Bridges carry the trains across, strong but graceful. They remind you that bridges are more than stone or steel, they are faith, stretched across uncertainty. Every span over water is an act of trust, trust in design, in balance, in the invisible laws of physics that allow weight to hover above air and current. Standing here, you feel the quiet miracle of it, the way human hands and minds found a way to let trains glide across rivers as easily as clouds drift across sky. As you walk, your thoughts wander to the first passengers who traveled these lines. For them, the countryside must have felt both familiar and strange, slipping past the windows in blurred motion. Before railways, most journeys unfolded at the pace of a horse, or at the rhythm of walking feet. Suddenly, landscapes that once stretched endless became scenery glimpsed in moments. The fields did not change, yet the experience of them transformed. A meadow is different when you cross it slowly, noticing every flower, every insect. It is different again when it sweeps past at 30 miles an hour, then faster, until it becomes little more than a smear of green and gold. Time itself bends along the rails. What once took days now takes hours, what once demanded patience becomes swift. Yet in that swiftness lies its own kind of slowness. The train gives you time not to labor, not to drive, but simply to sit, to watch, to drift. You think of passengers leaning their heads against cool glass, lulled by the rhythm of wheels, eyes half closing as the fields unfurl in dreamlike succession. The train is motion and rest all at once, a paradox that soothes the body into sleep even as it carries it forward. You stop again where the rails curve. In the distance, you see the sweep of farmland, the careful rows of crops stretching like another set of lines across the earth. Rails and rows mirror each other, human attempts to shape the land into order, to draw straight lines in a world that prefers to flow. Yet even in this order, wildness remains. Clouds drift unmeasured, winds swirl without map, and rivers cut their own meandering paths. The rails exist not in opposition to nature but in dialogue with it, one rhythm layered upon another. The sun dips lower, washing the fields in gentle amber. Shadows grow long across the rails, painting them in alternating bars of light and dark. You realize that rails are not only pathways across space, they are markers of time. Morning light casts them one way, evening light another, and with every season, their appearance shifts. Snow buries them in white silence, rain slicks them with silver, summer heat makes them shimmer like liquid. They are constants that change with the world around them, as steady as memory yet as fleeting as breath. As you linger in the fading light, you think of the diary of time written here. Every journey leaves its trace, the faint groove of wheels, the worn planks of crossings, the softened stones of ballast. The fields have witnessed countless comings and goings, yet they remain. And within them, the rails keep their patient line, carrying past, present, and future in quiet tandem. You close your eyes, letting the sounds of evening settle. A cricket begins its song, steady and simple. The air cools, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and grass. The rails gleam one last time before night claims them, and in that gleam, you feel the continuation of story, the knowledge that this line does not end here, that it will carry on across valleys and mountains, into towns and cities, into new landscapes and new thoughts. And as the darkness gathers, you wonder what lies beyond the fields, where the rails climb higher, bending into the hills, curving toward destinations not yet seen, perhaps into tunnels carved through stone, where darkness becomes its own kind of light, or into valleys where the whistle of a train echoes like memory across the walls of time. steam and sleepy stations. The station greets you with a hush that is not silence but a layering of soft sounds. A pigeon coos somewhere in the rafters. A clock ticks, patient and steady, each second echoing into the long hall of waiting. The air is cool, carrying the faint metallic tang of rails, and the richer, heavier scent of coal that still lingers in the wood and stone. You pause in the doorway, lantern in hand, as if stepping into another time. Steam curls in ghostly ribbons from the tracks outside, drifting inward, brushing against your skin like breath. This place is not just a building. It is a threshold. Stations have always been more than points on a map. They are spaces of waiting and wondering, of endings and beginnings, of longing and return. Every wall here has absorbed the quiet vibrations of human stories, lovers parting with unspoken promises, families reuniting with tearful laughter, solitary travelers staring into the distance of their own thoughts. The benches seem to hold that weight, their wood polished not by varnish but by years of restless hands, folded coats, and bodies leaning into the patience of time. You move slowly along the platform. The hiss of valves greets you, sharp but soft, like an exhale held too long. The steam engine outside still breathes even while at rest. The science of that breath lies in water and fire, the meeting of opposites. Fire heats water, water becomes steam, steam expands and pushes against metal with invisible strength. That invisible strength is what moves steel wheels, what pulls tons of weight across the land. You think of how strange it is, and how beautiful, that simple boiling water carried humanity into a new age. Something as ordinary as a kettle on a stove, magnified, disciplined, and placed upon rails, became the heartbeat of a century. The station walls carry murals of soot. They tell stories not painted but etched by smoke. For years, coal smoke rose in thick plumes, darkening skies and blackening stone. It was not gentle, yet it was transformative. Coal gave energy to the industrial world, carving tunnels through mountains, laying bridges over rivers, weaving nations closer together. There is a paradox here: smoke that choked lungs, but also smoke that carried dreams forward. You breathe in the faint residue of that era, softened now with age, no longer harsh but almost sweet, like a memory blurred with distance. You settle onto a bench, running your hand across the wood. The grain of the seat whispers of trees, of forests felled to build places where travelers might pause. Everything around you is layered history. The iron beams overhead were mined from Earth's crust, smelted, forged, and shaped into strength. The bricks were clay once, soft in riverbeds, hardened in fire. The glass of the high windows was sand, melted into transparency. You sit surrounded by elements of earth transformed by fire and hand into a vessel of waiting. And within it, you wait too, carried not by wheels but by thought. The station's timetables rest like scriptures upon the walls. Their numbers and letters flicker faintly in the lantern's glow. Times of departure and arrival precise, measured, dependable. Yet behind them lies uncertainty. A delayed train, a missed connection, an unexpected arrival. You think of how railways reshaped human experience of time. Before trains, noon was not the same in every town. Each clock followed the sun in its own rhythm, so one village might live 10 minutes ahead of another. But trains required agreement. Schedules demanded precision. Out of steam and steel came the invention of standard time. To keep the rails safe, the world had to learn to share the same clock. You tilt your head back to look at the grand clock above. Its face is round, its hands graceful, its tick a lullaby of regularity. Time here is not just a measurement but a promise, that arrivals will follow departures, that endings will give way to beginnings. That waiting will eventually become motion. You feel your own heartbeat syncing with the clock's rhythm, slower, steadier, a reminder that sleep is also a journey timed in cycles, departures from waking and arrivals into dreams. The steam outside thickens, carrying with it the warmth of the engine's core. You imagine the fireman at work, shoveling coal into the furnace, sparks flying against the iron throat of the boiler. His muscles ache, his face glistens with heat, his rhythm steady and relentless. For every journey, unseen labor sustains the motion: the stoker, the engineer, the signalman. Their work is the invisible scaffolding of travel, just as the body carries the invisible scaffolding of breath, pulse, and thought. We move because countless processes work silently within us, unremarked, tireless, dependable. The whisper of wheels grows louder. The train outside shifts, as though turning in its sleep. Steam hisses in short bursts, valves releasing the breath of pressure. It feels alive, like some great animal resting at the platform, tethered yet ready to run. The locomotive gleams faintly under lantern light, its iron body curved and riveted, its pistons poised. You run your fingers lightly along the window frame beside you, feeling the vibration of its presence. Machines, too, have heartbeats not of blood but of motion, rhythm, and force. A soft breeze stirs the papers on a nearby counter. The scent of ink reaches you, faint but distinct. Tickets, schedules, newspapers, the written word always traveled with trains. They carried not only bodies but ideas, news, knowledge, the pulse of society spread from city to countryside. The station was once the internet of its day, where information arrived daily with the engine's whistle. To wait here was to wait for letters, for parcels, for stories. Even now, you feel that anticipation, the sense that every train brings not just passengers but messages from the wider world. The benches creak as you lean back, listening to the distant murmur of voices. They rise and fall like waves, a porter calling softly, a mother soothing a child, a group of travelers exchanging quiet laughter. Their sounds echo through the arches, softened by distance, blurred by steam. No voice is sharp here, everything becomes a lull, as though the station itself wishes to lull you into patience, into stillness. You close your eyes for a moment and picture stations across the world, each with its own shape, its own rhythm. Some grand with marble floors and vaulted ceilings, others simple wooden shelters against rain and wind. Yet all hold the same essence, a gathering point, a place between places. To be at a station is to be nowhere fully not at home, not yet at your destination. It is to exist in suspension, held gently between past and future. The science of suspension is balance. A train balances upon narrow tracks, wheels shaped with slight curves so they hug the rails. Your own body balances upon the seat, muscles adjusting without thought, spine holding you upright in effortless calculation. Even in stillness, balance is alive. The station feels like that too, balance between departure and arrival, between steam and silence, between memory and anticipation. The hiss of the engine softens, then grows again, like breath deepening in sleep. You imagine the pistons moving, the rod sliding, the entire machine waiting only for the signal to release its stored strength. It is patience in metal form, readiness without hurry. The lantern in your hand flickers, and you feel its flame joining the rhythm of the station, steady, calm, a companion in the waiting. You glance again at the timetable, its numbers glowing faintly. Each train listed is both promise and mystery. Where will it go? Who will it carry? What stories will step onto its platforms, and what stories will step away? Every station is a library, not of books but of lives crossing paths. You are one of them now, your quiet presence another line in the endless record. Steam gathers again, drifting like fog across the hall. It blurs the edges of pillars, softens the lines of doors, makes the world seem dreamlike, suspended between waking and sleeping. You breathe it in, warm and damp, like clouds you can touch. It smells of coal and water, of fire turned into motion, of history breathing one last time into the present. The whistle sounds at last low, resonant, lingering. It echoes through the arches and rolls across the fields beyond. A call, a reminder, a promise that the waiting will end, that stillness will give way to movement. Your body relaxes at the sound, not startled but soothed, as if the whistle itself is a lullaby. You close your eyes once more and let the vibration of it settle deep inside. Here, in this sleepy station of steam and wood, you feel the weight of centuries. You feel how progress once sounded like this, a hiss, a whistle, a rhythm of wheels. You feel how dreams were carried not by wings but by rails, across landscapes that had never known such speed. And you sense that within the steam, within the benches, within the waiting, there is a truth about journeys, that every ending folds quietly into a beginning, and every beginning carries echoes of endings past. And as the steam thickens, curling like a curtain across the hall, you wonder what lies ahead when the train departs through tunnels carved deep into stone, where the darkness itself becomes part of the journey, where shadows press close, and the sound of wheels echoes like a heartbeat within the earth, and you sense that even in darkness, the rails always find their way forward. Night trains and secret journeys. The platform glows faintly as the night stretches wide above you. A quiet hum lingers in the air, the low metallic breathing of a train waiting patiently at the edge of departure. You step closer, feeling the cool breath of evening settle on your skin, and for a moment, the world feels suspended, as though everything beyond this station has paused to let you board. The train, long and gleaming in strips of muted light, is not merely a machine tonight. It is a vessel for dreams, a slow-moving cradle across the darkened countryside. When you step inside, the doors close with a hush, as though sealing you into another world. The carriage is dimly lit, lamps softened by frosted glass, creating halos of golden glow. You hear the shuffle of a distant passenger, the faint thud of a suitcase meeting the luggage rack, and then the train sighs into motion. Outside, the platform drifts away, and the station lamps retreat like stars swallowed by the horizon. You are moving forward, carried by iron wheels and hidden engines, deeper into the mystery of night. The steady rhythm begins almost immediately. Wheels on track, a repetition so measured, so even, that it settles into your body like a second heartbeat. Each clack is a reassurance, each gap in the rail a gentle reminder of distance passing quietly beneath you. Your breath begins to follow the rhythm without effort, exhaling with one click, inhaling with the next. Soon, your pulse, your thoughts, even the heaviness of your eyelids begin to synchronize with the lullaby of motion. In the stillness of the carriage, you look out the window. The glass is a mirror at first, reflecting the warm lamps of the train. But then, slowly, as your eyes adjust, the outside world emerges. A blur of trees, their silhouettes bending like shadows against the deeper dark. Fields roll past, unlit, except where the moon spills silver across their edges. Occasionally, a farmhouse appears, a single window glowing softly in the black expanse. A quiet beacon of someone else's waking life. And in each glimpse, you feel as though you are slipping through a hidden world, one reserved for travelers of the night. Night trains have always been wrapped in a kind of secret. Unlike the bright, bustling journeys of day, these are quieter, more intimate passages of time. History, too, holds stories of such journeys. In the 19th century, sleeper cars were introduced, allowing passengers to stretch out beneath heavy curtains and drift with the rails. These cars became rolling sanctuaries, lined with polished wood, velvet drapes, and gentle oil lamps. Famous names crossed the continent this way, riders scribbling by lantern light, merchants carrying fortunes in their luggage, and families resting as the train pulled them toward new beginnings. Even the science of sleep mingles with this journey. The rocking motion of a train is not unlike the sway of a cradle, the same kind of gentle vestibular stimulation that soothes infants into slumber. Modern researchers find that rhythmic motion helps synchronize brain waves, encouraging the slow oscillations linked to deep, restorative sleep. Here, you feel it for yourself, each sway of the carriage loosening muscles, each repetition of wheels settling your mind into a slower rhythm. You are cradled by engineering, by physics transformed into comfort. You wander, in thought or perhaps in dream, through the corridor of the train. Each compartment is a small universe. Behind one door, a family rests, a child clutching a toy as the parents murmur softly in the language of half-sleep. Behind another, A lone traveler writes in a notebook, the scratching pen keeping pace with the rolling of the wheels. Perhaps in another compartment, two strangers share quiet conversation, voices low and intimate, softened by the hum of travel. All of you are bound together by the same rails, the same night sky, though each journey is secret in its details, known only to the dreamer who lives it. The air inside the train carries a faint blend of scents: warm fabric, polished wood, perhaps even the lingering ghost of coal smoke from older days. You imagine the grand trains of the past, their engines releasing thick plumes of steam, clouding stations in white mist. To board such a train at night would have been to step through a dreamscape, lamps glowing like constellations, platforms half hidden in vapor, and voices muffled as though already drifting into another world. Even now, some of that magic lingers. The sleek engines may run on electricity, but the spell of the night train endures. Outside the window, the landscape continues to shift. Hills rise and fall. Rivers appear suddenly, catching moonlight like ribbons of liquid glass. The train crosses bridges where your reflection trembles in the water below, then plunges into tunnels where darkness is complete, a pocket of silence broken only by the deeper echo of wheels. Emerging again into starlight feels like awakening from a short, hidden dream. You find yourself lulled by the rhythm of this alternation: dark and light, hidden and revealed, sleep and wake. You think of how night trains connect cities, sometimes even countries, pulling lines of human connection through geography. The Orient Express once carried passengers across continents, Paris to Istanbul, in journeys that lasted days, weaving stories of spies, lovers, diplomats, and dreamers. Other routes crossed Siberia, threading through endless forests and frozen plains, where travelers would fall asleep watching snow drift past their windows and awaken to another horizon entirely. Each rail is a thread in a vast woven map, tying places together across the fabric of night. And then there is the science of time itself. On a night train, hours do not feel linear. Instead, they dissolve into cycles of motion and rest. The steady rhythm tricks the body into timelessness. You may drift into sleep for minutes, or for hours, and wake not knowing how far the train has carried you. Outside, the stars hold their positions with patient steadiness, while the moon slides slowly across the sky, marking passage more gently than any clock. The experience is both ancient and modern, timeless and fleeting, as though the rails run not only through land but also through the folds of memory and dream. Your own eyelids grow heavier as the train continues. The fabric of the seat beneath you is soft, the air warm but tinged with the coolness of glass near your cheek. You surrender to the sense of being carried. The train will guide you forward without your effort, without demand, allowing you to rest. Outside, the landscape rolls on, unseen now, folded into shadow and silence. Inside, the hum of wheels becomes more than sound, it becomes a rhythm of trust, a promise that you are safe within the hidden corridors of the night. Perhaps you dream of other journeys. Perhaps you imagine boarding another train in another time, sitting beside figures of history, or even versions of yourself not yet known. Perhaps the strangers who travel with you tonight are dreaming too, their breaths rising and falling in a shared, unconscious harmony. You are all passengers in this hidden world, bound by the same motion, the same rails, the same slow surrender to sleep. The night train continues forward, its light a thin ribbon stretching across the land, unseen by most, yet carrying within it an entire constellation of lives. You rest, lulled, knowing that even in darkness, you are being carried forward into what waits. The rhythm of wheels is steady, patient, infinite. And as you listen, as you drift, you begin to wonder where the rails might lead when the dawn returns, and how each journey of night becomes a story waiting for the morning. And so, as the train carries you deeper into the unseen hours, you begin to sense the faint glimmer of something beyond the promise of morning light, and the question of what awakens when the first sunbeam touches the rails. Bridges, tunnels, and time. You lean back against the gentle sway of the carriage, and the thought arises: railways are not just about the trains themselves. They are about the pathways carved through the earth, the crossings lifted into the sky, the quiet persistence of human hands making stone and steel into something that carries memory across time. Tonight, as the wheels hum softly beneath you, your mind wanders into the places where trains slip into tunnels and float across bridges, and you begin to notice how each of these crossings reshapes the rhythm of travel and the way you understand time. The train curves toward a tunnel, its dark mouth framed by moss and stone. You can almost feel the breath of cool air spilling out, like the exhale of a sleeping mountain. As the engine enters, the sound deepens into echo, and the world outside disappears. For a moment, there is only darkness and vibration, only the rhythmic pulse of steel on steel. Tunnels are the most secretive of railways' creations, built not to be admired but to allow passage where nature once said no. You imagine the workers who, more than a century ago, chipped away at rock by lamplight. Many of the earliest tunnels were dug by hand, with little more than hammers and picks, progress measured in inches per day. The Mont Cenis tunnel, which burrows beneath the Alps, took almost 15 years to complete. Before dynamite and advanced drills, crews often relied on patience, sweat, and candlelight. The mountains were steady, immovable, and yet slowly, inch by inch, people hollowed a path through them. When that tunnel opened in 1871, it felt less like engineering and more like opening a new corridor in time itself. Inside the tunnel, sound becomes a companion. The whistle of air rushing past, the steady drone of the engine, the faint rattle of windows in their frames. All of it amplifies, then fades, then returns in waves. You realize that tunnels are not only passageways but instruments. Resonating chambers where the train itself becomes a kind of flute played by motion and air. In such darkness, your body forgets distance, and only the rhythm of sound tells you how far you've gone. When you emerge again into moonlight, it feels like a rebirth. Tunnels always offer that sense of transformation. One moment you are in one world, the next you are somewhere entirely different, another valley, another river, another season perhaps. It is as if the tunnel is a brief suspension of time, a place where your sense of continuity dissolves, and only when you step back into light do you recognize how far you've traveled. Soon the tracks lift onto a bridge, and your body senses the shift. The earth is no longer close beneath you. Instead, there is a hush, a floating sensation, as though the train itself has grown wings. Bridges are the most visible of all crossings, the opposite of tunnels. They are monuments of passage, exposed to sky and water, their strength carried in graceful arches or steel trusses. To travel across one is to feel both the solid weight of engineering and the fragile wonder of suspension. You picture the Forth Bridge in Scotland, its great red lattice striding across the Firth like a giant sculpture. Completed in 1890, it was once the longest cantilever bridge in the world, its towers rising higher than church spires. Thousands of tons of steel were fitted together with rivets, each hammered in place by workers whose days were marked by the clang of iron against iron. Some say that to maintain such a structure is to paint forever. By the time crews finished painting one end, they had to begin again at the other. The bridge became not just a crossing but a metaphor for unending effort, for the way structures live only as long as we tend to them. Crossing bridges at night carries a different kind of quiet. Beneath you, the river glimmers faintly in the moonlight. Its surface seems still, though you know it is always flowing. Resonating chambers where the train itself becomes a kind of flute played by motion and air. In such darkness, your body forgets distance, and only the rhythm of sound tells you how far you've gone. When you emerge again into moonlight, it feels like a rebirth. Tunnels always offer that sense of transformation. One moment you are in one world, the next you are somewhere entirely different, another valley, another river, another season perhaps. It is as if the tunnel is a brief suspension of time, a place where your sense of continuity dissolves, and only when you step back into light do you recognize how far you've traveled. Soon the tracks lift onto a bridge, and your body senses the shift. The earth is no longer close beneath you. Instead, there is a hush, a floating sensation, as though the train itself has grown wings. Bridges are the most visible of all crossings, the opposite of tunnels. They are monuments of passage, exposed to sky and water, their strength carried in graceful arches or steel trusses. To travel across one is to feel both the solid weight of engineering and the fragile wonder of suspension. You picture the Forth Bridge in Scotland, its great red lattice striding across the Firth like a giant sculpture. Completed in 1890, it was once the longest cantilever bridge in the world, its towers rising higher than church spires. Thousands of tons of steel were fitted together with rivets, each hammered in place by workers whose days were marked by the clang of iron against iron. Some say that to maintain such a structure is to paint forever. By the time crews finished painting one end, they had to begin again at the other. The bridge became not just a crossing but a metaphor for unending effort, for the way structures live only as long as we tend to them. Crossing bridges at night carries a different kind of quiet. Beneath you, the river glimmers faintly in the moonlight. Its surface seems still, though you know it is always flowing. always moving onward. Bridges are reminders that water itself is time, always slipping past, always reshaping the banks it touches. To ride across a bridge is to hover above that current, as though the train has been given the privilege of pausing the river's story for a single heartbeat. In your mind, bridges and tunnels are not opposites but companions. One brings you under, the other lifts you above. One hides you in silence, the other exposes you to wind and light. Together they reveal the ingenuity of humans shaping landscapes to connect distant places. They remind you that the railway is more than a line across a map, it is a thread woven through obstacles, bending valleys and mountains into part of the journey. As the train continues, you think about the idea of time itself bending. For travelers of the 19th century, a journey that once took days or weeks could suddenly be measured in hours. Before tunnels and bridges, mountains and rivers meant delay, detour, or impossibility. Afterward, they became mere passages, woven into the rhythm of continuous motion. A letter carried by train across Europe could now reach its destination not in months but in days. Commerce shifted, families reconnected, and the mental map of the world grew smaller. Time itself seemed to compress, to fold neatly into the length of a train ride. Yet while trains conquered space, they also created new rhythms of waiting. Schedules became essential. The idea of railway time was born, standardized time zones introduced so that timetables could make sense across vast distances. Before then, towns often kept their own local time, set by the position of the sun. Noon in one place might not match noon in another just a few miles away. But trains needed precision, a single clock that all stations could follow. So railways bent not only mountains and rivers but also our understanding of time itself, reshaping society into a synchronized heartbeat. The thought is soothing, that the pulse of wheels on rails once aligned millions of people across continents. The sound you hear now, this steady lullaby, was once the very metronome by which nations learned to keep time together. Your gaze drifts out the window, where the night seems endless, stitched only by faint starlight and the occasional silhouette of trees. Somewhere in the distance, another bridge awaits, another tunnel, another threshold where the train will cross from one world into the next. You find yourself marveling at the persistence of motion, at how railways invite you to surrender to the journey. You do not steer, you do not push forward, you are simply carried, as if time itself has taken your hand. You think of Japan's Seikan Tunnel, one of the longest in the world, stretching more than 30 miles beneath the sea. Entire villages were relocated, decades of work invested, and countless innovations developed to make that passage possible. To ride through it today is to glide beneath an ocean, held safe by layers of rock and concrete, reminded that even the most formidable boundaries can be softened by patience and imagination. You think of China's Danyang Kunshan Grand Bridge, the longest in the world, stretching for over 100 miles across farmland and water. From above, it looks less like a bridge and more like a ribbon unfurling across the land, its length beyond what the human eye can hold at once. It is proof that a bridge can be more than a single crossing, it can become a horizon in itself. Each tunnel, each bridge, each crossing is also a memory. The echo of footsteps on construction sites long abandoned. The calloused hands of workers who never lived to see the final stone placed. The engineers sketching lines across maps, imagining a future where distance could be erased. When you ride a train, you ride on their dreams as much as on steel. The rhythm of the journey soothes you again, carrying your thoughts like driftwood on a slow-moving river. You realize that bridges and tunnels are not only feats of engineering but metaphors for your own life. The times you have gone inward, seeking quiet paths through darkness, like a tunnel. The times you have risen above obstacles, suspended for a moment between what was and what is to come, like a bridge. The railway mirrors the heart, as all journeys do. Outside, the night grows deeper, and the train presses forward. You sense that each crossing, whether beneath stone or above water, marks not just distance but transformation. To travel is to change, to see the world through new frames of light and shadow. You begin to wonder, if bridges and tunnels reshape landscapes in time, what do stations do? What happens when the motion pauses, and you step into a place built not for crossing but for waiting, for gathering, for beginning again? And with that question, you let your thoughts drift toward the quiet architecture of stations, where the next part of the journey begins. The last whistle. You sit quietly in the final carriage, your body swaying gently with the rhythm of the train. The sky outside begins to soften, pale silver unfolding at the edges of the horizon. The world seems to hush, as if it too is waiting for the sound that lingers in the air, the long, low whistle of the train. It echoes through valleys, slips over rivers, and disappears into the thinning veil of night. It is not just a sound, but a signal, a reminder that journeys do not always end where the rails do. The whistle feels like breath, stretched across time. You hear its tones resonate in your chest, as though it speaks in a language you somehow know. That whistle is more than machinery. It is the physics of air under pressure, flowing through a narrow chamber, emerging as vibration. Simple science, yet it carries the weight of memory and emotion. A whistle cuts through silence the way dawn cuts through darkness, slow, certain, and inevitable. Trains have always been marked by sound. Before electricity, before digital voices on stations, it was the whistle that stitched railways into the landscape. The whistle was a warning, yes, but also an announcement of presence, a herald of arrival. It told farmers in their fields that time was moving, that goods and letters and people were on the move. It told children in small towns that the world was bigger than they could see, that it could be reached with wheels and rails. As you sit in the carriage, you realize that sound travels differently in the quiet of morning. The atmosphere, cool and still, bends it gently, carrying it farther. Physicists call this refraction of sound, where temperature layers in the air guide the vibrations like invisible tunnels. A whistle at dawn can travel for miles, farther than in the heat of noon. Perhaps that is why it feels so eternal now, hanging in your ears, stretching across fields unseen. The whistle reminds you of time itself. Not the strict ticking of clocks, but the deep current of time that moves beneath your life, steady and unhurried. Railways taught humanity to measure time differently. Before trains, towns lived on local time, each clock tower tuned to the sun overhead. Noon in one town was not the same as noon in the next. But trains demanded precision. Schedules could not bend to the sun. And so, railways gave birth to standardized time, entire zones synchronized so that the journey of steel and steam could remain steady. You imagine sitting in a wooden station more than a century ago, watching a clock reset by the railway office. People must have felt the strangeness of it that time itself could be altered, shifted to match the pulse of trains. And yet, that was the gift of railways. They stitched not only space, but time. The whistle you hear now is part of that stitching, reminding you that dawn here is the same dawn felt in countless other towns, all connected by steel threads across the earth. You lean your head against the window. Outside, mist curls in hollows between fields, soft as sleep itself. The rails gleam faintly, wet with dew, their lines receding until they seem to vanish into the pale horizon. You realize the rails are more than pathways, they are metaphors of continuity. They carry not only trains, but also the weight of human hope that we might travel farther, faster, together. Every whistle carries stories. A whistle at midnight in the 19th century may have meant coal shipments rolling through the darkness, keeping lamps burning in distant cities. A whistle at dawn might have meant a family's long-awaited arrival, reunion at a platform where hands reached across distance. During wars, the whistle sometimes meant parting, trains filled with soldiers pulling away, uncertainty carried with them. Yet in peace, the same sound meant joy, markets opening, children waving at carriages, strangers becoming fellow travelers. You close your eyes, listening to the fading note of the whistle. In your mind, you see how the whistle is not just a tone, but a wave ripples of compression moving through molecules of air. Each molecule touches the next, passing the vibration forward, like hands passing a lantern through the night. Sound exists because matter listens and responds. Even silence, you realize, is only the absence of this passing. The carriage creaks softly, and you feel the slowing of the wheels. The train eases its pace, as if reluctant to disturb the stillness of dawn. You are aware that trains have always had this dual rhythm: movement and pause, speed and slowing, departure and arrival. The whistle marks both, its long cry a signal of change. You feel that rhythm in your own body, the way your breath moves in and out, the way your heart slows and quickens. The whistle is like a breath of the world, exhaled through steel lungs. History lingers in this sound too. The earliest train whistles were simple steam horns, designed in the 1830s. Engineers discovered that directing steam through a narrow opening could create a loud, piercing tone, powerful enough to cut through the noise of wheels and wind. Over time, whistles were tuned, adjusted to specific notes so each railway line had its signature voice. A listener could tell from the pitch which company's train was approaching. Whistles became signatures, as unique as handwriting, as telling as dialects. The whistle you hear now carries that lineage, even if the train itself has changed. Many trains today no longer burn coal or release steam, yet the whistle endures. Even in electric or diesel engines, a horn must call out, because the tradition is not only functional but human. The world expects that cry, expects the sound of distance being bridged. To silence it would be to break something in the story of travel. You think of how sound has always been linked to memory. A certain note can return you to childhood, to a night spent waiting for someone to come home, to the warmth of being gathered on a platform beneath lanterns. The whistle does not just travel through the air, it travels through you, stirring layers of memory and dream. Perhaps that is why the final whistle of a night train feels so moving. It is not an ending, but a reminder that endings themselves are soft, porous things. The train slows further, and the sky brightens. You notice how the colors shift, silver blending to pale rose, rose into a quiet gold. Dawn spreads like ink in water, slow and unstoppable. In that light, the whistle feels different, less haunting, more gentle. It is no longer a cry of distance, but a sigh of arrival. You wonder if time itself might have a sound like this, a long note fading across horizons. Just as stars release light that travels for millennia before touching your eyes, so too might moments release echoes that continue long after the moment has passed. Perhaps the whistle is one of those echoes, lingering so that the journey never feels abruptly cut. Your eyes grow heavy, lulled by the carriage's slowing rhythm. You know that all journeys eventually reach their pause, but the pause is never final. Another train will whistle, another set of tracks will gleam in morning light. The story continues, not in one place, but in the endless weaving of rails across the earth. And as the train's final whistle stretches thin into the awakening world, you feel it guiding you, not to an ending, but to a threshold. You sense that after whistles and rails, after dawn and steel, there is still another question waiting. A question about where journeys go when the train itself grows silent, and what carries us onward when the rails at last give way to open air. And so the last night train continues on, beyond the dawn, beyond the horizon, into the quiet of dreams. Good night, from Whispers of the Night.